Welcome to The Girls Who Waited, the Geek Girl show about Doctor Who and more. We are at DragonCon Live, DragonCon 2013. We're actually next to each other, which is really awesome. And do you want to introduce it, or do you want me to introduce it?
No, you can do.
Okay, I'll introduce it. Well, we were lucky enough to get to sit in on a press conference with Peter Davidson while here at the convention. So you are getting ready to watch the press conference of Peter Davidson at DragonCon 2013.
And as you know, Angela was able to interview him at Mysticon. That video was about 3 to 5 minutes long.
5 minutes.
And so we just had a
bellhop guy come by and say hi on the show.
This press conference is actually, I think we've got like almost 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's 40 minutes long. 40 minutes. You guys be lucky. I held my arm up for 40 minutes for all of you because we love our viewers that much.
So it's going to have lots of really great information in it from Peter about Doctor Who.
Yeah, about Doctor Who, about his career, what he thinks about the new Doctor. So it's some fun stuff. He also kind of jokes around about some of the panels here because it seems that someone on the Sylvester McCoy Peter Davidson panel asked about the spoons. And it seems like, I'm just clearing this up for some of you that would be like, what in the world is he talking about? It seems that on stage, Sylvester McCoy played the spoons and Peter Davidson played the guitar, and they had them backstage ready. So I think they planted that question, and I think he also thinks that.
That would have been fun to see. And sorry we didn't get to record the panels.
It's
so popular.
Lots and lots of people here, so it's really, really hard to get into some of these panels.
And all the Marriott staff is super polite and saying hello to us as we're sitting here on the floor. So thank you, Marriott staff, for being awesome and polite.
And thank you, DragonCon, for allowing us to be part of the press interview. We really, really appreciate it. We had a great time this year.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with Peter Davidson.
However,
you ask questions.
I'll start it. So, with 2 doctors in the family, do you ever compare tenures, and who wins?
No, we don't ever compare tenures. I don't think I've ever had a conversation about... I mean, we certainly have conversations about everything surrounding being Doctor Who. You know, the sort of, I suppose, the difficulties it involves in terms, especially in David's case now. With me, it's a case of remembering. But with David, it's just the difficulties of just conducting an ordinary life. Conducting a kind of ordinary life, which is kind of, in a sense, bizarre, what we kind of all aspire to. Not that we don't enjoy, being flattered immensely and, being kind of loved by fans. That's fantastic. But at the same time, kind of like in an ideal world, to separate the two things. So you have a kind of private life that is just about, you and your family. And I think that's the way it probably works. That will maintain your sanity. Better. I think so. We certainly talk about that kind of thing, but I don't think we've ever really talked about. Well, in my time, I mean, I have told him I'm deeply envious of his special effects. That's about it.
I noticed you're wearing a crocheted celery. Did someone make that for you?
This was given to me, yes, as a gift. In fact, there's 2 pieces of crocheted celery.
Do you hate crocheted celery as much as you hate celery?
No, I like it a lot more. So somebody gave it 1 piece to me, and then somebody came on to me today and went, "I've got a present." "Oh, you've already wearing one." So I said, "Well, I'll wear 2 then." So that's fine.
In your observations over the years, have you noticed how things have evolved as far as your fans and Doctor Who fandom?
How the fandom has evolved?
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly got a broader base now. That's perfectly true. I mean, I think there was always a hardcore of fans who were always as mad about the programme. I was going to say just mad, but about the programme, as they always were. But it's certainly, I've noticed that it's got a much broader appeal now. I mean, in the old days, you would never have got small children coming up and saying, "Oh, I love your Doctor." I think they found their way back to the classic Doctors through, obviously, the new series of the Doctor.
And were there quite as many people dressed up as the Doctor back in your day?
Actually, there were.
At conventions.
There were, weren't there? Yeah, there was. In some cases, it seemed almost more. Although that would not be a convention like this. That would be a Doctor Who convention at which you were a guest, and so you would get an inordinate number of people dressed as you. I used to, in very early days, go in my costume while I fitted into it. But then I stopped, not because I didn't fit into it anymore, but just because you would arrive at a convention and there would be a number of people dressed as you. So it seemed to render the whole exercise pointless. Some of them were probably better than mine. But no, I think it's always been that hardcore, which kept going even while the program was off the air. Which in a way, as I said yesterday, kept the program going, I think.
Why do you think it's been so enduring for 50 years of popularity? And increasing now, it seems.
Yeah, well, I suppose the easy answer to that, and I can only speak for Britain, really, is that he's kind of our superhero. He's a peculiarly British superhero, right, in that he's not really a superhero at all. I mean, you have your Superman, your Iron Man, your Batman, your Spider-Man.
He doesn't even kill anybody, right?
And we have this rather strange person. But they hit upon by accident. It was never a design, I don't think, when they sit down, when Verity Lambert produced that first series, she ever dreamt in a million years it would carry on. But there was something about it, very probably coming off the American comics, that just suddenly appealed to people in Britain, science fiction fraternity, and they kind of adopted it, they made it their own, and it became very important. It became very important to people. It's kind of say, it's almost like a legitimate thing to say that it appealed to the kind of nerdy community. Do you know what I mean? I mean, at the nicest kind of way, but it did. And sometimes, I mean, a number of people, and I'm sure they do this about many programs, but not much more so I found about Doctor Who than any other program I've been in. People will say how important the program was to them, that maybe they watched it at a particularly difficult time of their life or something like that, and it became, the idea of the Doctor became they could identify with the Doctor in some way, or through the companions, and it sort of became very important to them. And I don't know that I've done another program where people have ever said that to me before. So there's something about the character of the Doctor.
Was that regeneration a part of that from the beginning?
No, I don't think as far as I know, after 3 years, William Hartnell got too old and ill to do it anymore, and said, "Well, I want to leave." By which time the program was enormously popular. And I think this is true. I don't know this for an absolute fact, but I think that's when they came up with the idea of the regeneration, because they wanted to continue with the program, but they wanted to have they had to have another actor.
Fascinating idea.
So there was an underground love for Doctor Who in America for a long time, but it wasn't terribly popular. So I imagine you could walk the streets of New York City and not be recognized all
Yes,
the time. Is that changed?
It probably has. I haven't walked that many streets of America recently to know whether it's changed, but certainly if I was recognised in America, and it would happen from time to time, it was usually for all creatures great and small, nearly always, not for Doctor Who. And if you mentioned Doctor Who to your average American person, they would have heard of it maybe, but they wouldn't really know what it was about.
Okay.
So, but that didn't stop us, having conventions in places where a great number of people would turn up, but it was very much a cult following.
How big a factor was cricket in your life?
My life? Well, quite a lot really in terms of sport, because I wasn't very classically sporty at school. I wouldn't have gone into the soccer team or anything like that. But cricket was something that I was actually quite good at. You didn't have to be fantastically sporty to be good at cricket. It's all kind of changed now. Now actually they are very, very fit and very, very. But in the old days, you get quite sort of stocky people being great batsmen and cricketers or bowlers and things. So fitness wasn't held in great sort. I suppose a bit like baseball, where you got the same kind of thing, didn't you?
Right.
It wasn't. The people who played baseball weren't the fittest people in the world. I mean, they could damn well hit a baseball hard, but they weren't really, the epitome of fitness and health. So, and I was, not that I was bad, but I just loved cricket. So when John Nathan Turner said to me, we want to make the image younger and sort of slightly, I came up with the idea of cricket.
Does that mean filming Black Orchid, the episode where you played lots of cricket, was like your favorite episode to film?
Well, it wasn't actually my favourite episode, but I did love the cricketing scene. It's because I actually bowled someone out in shot. They said, well, we'll do this, and then we'll cut. We'll have you running up to bowl, and we'll cut before the ball, and then we'll do a separate shot with the ball hitting the wicket. But I ran up and bowled it in shot and actually bowled the guy out. So I was very, very pleased about that. I never shut up about it.
So what was your favourite episode?
My favourite episode, I had two really. For the first couple of seasons, I think it was Earthshock. And then after I'd finished, The Caves of Androzani was my favourite, because I just felt everything kind of came together. And I joke about, apart from turning into Colin Baker in the end, but it just that we had a great director, we had a great cast. We often had a great cast, but everything, just the enthusiasm of the director and the fact we had a classic Doctor Who writer, and that made a big difference. I mean, I think that the major difference, apart from much better special effects, between the old series and the new series is that whatever you think about the new series, the writing, I think, is going to be quite a few steps up generally from the classic series, because the writers now love the genre, really, and that I think shows. And we've had two producers so far in the new series, and they've both been huge fans of Doctor Who. I don't think we ever had a producer in the classic series who was a huge fan of Doctor Who. They wanted to make Doctor Who popular, but they weren't fans of the genre, I don't think. So I think that's a great plus for the programme. So apart from the special effects, I'm also very envious of the scripts. I mean, I have my little things about it. I think I'd like to see them slow down a bit, ease off on the wham bam. Everything has to be sort of.
But with all the 1 hour episodes compared to, you had a lot more time.
We had a lot more time, yes. But the very whole thing about, in television in general over the last few years, and oddly now, of course, there is now a backlash against that. But for years, I would be making programmes and they go, be detective thing. We've got to have a body in the first 5 minutes. We've got to have a body in the first 5 minutes. If we don't have a body, people will switch off. And then we've got to do this by the end of the first part. We've got to do this. And then, of course, suddenly people discovered the killing and discovered that people actually would sit and watch something that was very slow and meticulously drawn out. And then we got a taste for that. And then we did our version of it. You did a version of the killing. But so people suddenly rediscovered that people do, in fact, have a concentration span. We're not all going to get up and walk out of the room if something doesn't blow up in the first 2 seconds. Kevin Spacey made a very good point. He did a lecture I read about at Edinburgh Festival this year, and he made a very good point that when everyone was talking about people now have very small attention spans, he made the point, if you give them something big enough, people will sit for an entire day and watch a box set. That's a fantastic attention span. So you've just got to give them the quality, and they will be there in their droves. But instead of that, sometimes I think
if you can you tell us the process on how you were actually chosen to become the Doctor? Did you audition for the position?
No, I had worked with John Nathan Turner briefly on All Creatures Great and Small. He was a production unit manager, which means he was sort of in charge of the money on that for a while, and then he left to go on to produce Doctor Who. I did another 2 series of All Creatures, and I left and did a comedy series. And then one night I was just sitting at home, and John Nathan Turner rang me up and said, told me that Tom Baker was leaving Doctor Who, and I didn't really, because it was so far left field, that I just, even when he said to me, Tom Baker's leaving Doctor Who, I thought, why is he telling me this? And he said, how would you feel about being the next Doctor? I think it seemed like there was a silence, because I was very aware that I didn't go, yes, great, fantastic, because I was used to William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, I suppose. And so the idea of me playing the Doctor was a bit, odd, a bit strange. And one of the great things about the new series coming back for me was I no longer seem out of place at all. It seems now like I started a trend. but I knew kind of even when he asked me, even though I hesitated, that in the end I would say yes to it, because you're being asked to play an iconic hero from your childhood. And in the end you can't turn that down, however unsure you are about how it will go.
Did you feel intimidated for following up Tom Baker after his long run?
No, people ask this a lot in America, and I make the point that Tom Baker was Doctor Number 4. Mm-hmm. Over here, for a lot of people, I know Tom Baker was the only doctor they'd seen, right. And so me coming along was a bit, of a shock. But in Britain, he was simply Doctor Number 4. I had grown up with William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, not Tom Baker. I had seen a couple of his stories, but I hadn't really watched the series, only because I got to that age when you kind of, you're doing other things, usually with miniskirts. But you just have other preoccupations in life, and so I was more intimidated by following William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton than I was Tom Baker.
What are your thoughts about the new Doctor?
I think it's a brilliant choice. I mean, you can tell kind of, all these names whenever this happens, every single time there's a new Doctor, all these names, the tabloid newspapers say, this one is favourite, this one is favourite, and then they announce, no, this person has definitely been offered the part, mm-hmm. And you kind of know it's nonsense. Mm-hmm. But some of the names on the list, you think, oh no, you can't possibly be thinking that. But I just remember when I first heard Peter Capaldi's name, I just remember thinking, that's a damn good idea, actually. That's a really good idea. Simply because I always said you need an actor to play the part. You need a good actor, primarily. There's no point in getting a personality or a comic or something like that. I'm sure they're brilliant, and some of the names that came up, I love them in whatever they do, but not for this. And so when I heard the name Peter Capaldi, I just thought that's just a brilliant idea.
This is kind of a Leonard Nimoy kind of question in a way. A lot of the people in Star Trek were not real happy that they were so closely identified with that. And you've had a long, illustrious career. Yeah. Does it bug you at all that people, it's Doctor Who number 5?
No, the reason they worry about that is because it prevents them getting work. If it doesn't prevent them getting work, I don't think they mind about it at all. I mean, I was lucky. I know Tom had a bit of problem. He had done it for 7 years, and although he had sort of worked before and done lots of stuff before, it wasn't necessarily in the public's attention. I mean, he wouldn't have known who Tom Baker was when he took over. Whereas I'd come off the back of All Creatures Great and Small and a couple of other comedy series, and I only did 3 years, and I was very lucky when I left. I got another job very quickly, so I never felt the need to turn my back on it because it never really affected me, and I'm glad about that because it might have become necessary to do that. I mean, Tom kind of cut himself off from the program completely, and I understand why that was, because he wanted to kind of shed that image. But I fortunately for me, I didn't feel the need. I didn't have to do that. So.
With the 50th anniversary being upon us, do you reflect on, I played a part in this legacy?
Yeah, I do. It's hard. It was a very strange evening when they went along, because, in Britain we're on postage stamps now. Normally you have to be dead to be on postage stamps.
Well, your doctor is,
Well, that's true. They decided that they were going to put us on postage stamps, and you don't really take it. At first I just thought, oh, that's great, when they're on stamps. And then you go along and you just think, wow, my image is actually on a stamp. It's like it's the next best thing to be on a banknote, really.
Right.
Why aren't we on banknotes? Actually, I think we are in New Zealand.
Yeah.
There's a coin. There's a coin in New Zealand, yeah. But it's a fantastic feeling. I mean, you were aware that it's not really to do with you. It's not exactly an accolade for your, marvellous career in acting generally. It's just that you played this fantastically iconic part. So you don't get swept away by it that much. But it's a great feeling to think that, wow, I'm one of a very select few.
I know at other.
Got to stick on my letter and post it. I actually sent my accountant one, but I used a Colin Baker stamp because I didn't want to make waste money.
I know at other conventions and other panels you had mentioned that if you weren't included in the 50th anniversary episode, that you and the guys would actually make your own 50th anniversary episode. I know you're doing the Big Finish project, but are you going to do anything else, maybe, possibly?
Yeah, maybe a little surprise for you. Just keep your eyes peeled.
Cool.
It might be worth it. I don't know. But we're working hard to try and make something. Just just to make it something, little additions to the 50th anniversary special. I mean, I think the 50th anniversary special will be brilliant, and that's great. But I think it's nice if we can just do as much stuff just for you guys out there, really.
So has David at least shared something with you on what's happening in the 50th?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, so you at least know.
I at least know.
So, speaking of David, have you ever, I'm assuming you've come across all the little internet memes about the doctor and the doctor's daughter marrying the, so on and so forth, and I'm assuming it was funny the first few times you saw it, and then after that it probably got old.
It's my fault, really, because I did once relate the story of giving the father of the bride speech at their wedding. And that was very peculiar because I kind of went through the sort of process and had to stop when you got to the point of my daughter marrying me. It was just a joke.
It just took a life of its own. Huh?
Yeah, but it's very nice. They're a great family.
So all of us come to conventions like this because we're passionate about something, whether it's Doctor Who or bronies or whatever. What kinds of things are you interested in? Whether it's science fiction related, what kind of TV shows do you watch? What do you like to read?
Oh, right. I kind of like. I used to be a big fan of the sort of American detective fiction from the hard-boiled, the original Dashiell Hammett kind of thing. Through Ross Thomas, I used to love Ross Thomas. I remember him, and also Ed McBain, procedural, the procedural police detective things. I think that we were talking about this yesterday. When I first came over to conventions, I remember in instances like this where you lot would ask questions about the brilliant British drama on television and belittle your own drama, the programs. And I think actually in those days you were justified in doing that because it was really just a big, massive, soapy kind of what's the word to use? It was just kind of very, very predictable, soapy drama. But now I think that with the emergence of with cable channels, I think you make the best drama. I really do. I mean, the number of drama programs that you make now. And that's sort of a bit like it would do in Britain if we got our act together. It lifts then the network shows. They think, well, we've got to compete with this. But I think cable channels, it seems to me, have led the way in making great drama. And my favourite drama series are nearly always American drama series, not British drama series.
Were you a big Law and Order fan before?
I did like Law and Order. Yes, actually, I did because again, I love series to be what they're about, really, as a general rule. So if you're making a police or this kind of series or a courtroom drama, you don't make it about who's having an affair with who.
Right.
You make it about the case because that's what we want to see. We want to see this case develop right from the crime right the way through to the courtroom sequence, and that's what I liked about Law and Order. But I like, I said yesterday, my favourite series at the moment is Justified, which I think is terrific, very underrated series, really. I think it probably is quite popular over here, but I just think it's one of the best series that there is on American TV.
Did you like Broadchurch?
I did like Broadchurch, yes. They're doing an American Broadchurch, yes, I did think, but that was our kind of version in a way of the killing. It was our rediscovery of the telling of a story, but not going bam, bam, bam. And I think that was great, and the success of that was phenomenal in Britain. So again, it just showed you that people actually do have attention span, and I'll be very interested in seeing the American version of it. as long as they don't apply the wrong rules to it.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's always the danger.
Yeah.
But no, and as I say, I like, what am I watching at the moment? Or maybe you're not interested in that. Oh, they get the great thing, the Netflix, you know, the remake, actually, it doesn't bear any resemblance at all to the British.
Yeah, with Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey. Yeah. But it's great, I love it. So many, too many to mention, really. But,
You were the first Doctor who actually grew up with Doctor Who
Yes.
on the air. Does that make any difference in your portrayal or your perspective or sense of it?
I think it meant that I was very aware of bringing elements of the other Doctors into it. How successfully I did that, I don't know, but I was very aware of wanting to keep strains of both William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton in my Doctor. Tom, I suppose, I just thought would take care of himself because he was so recent. So I was very, yes, I think so. It did affect it to a certain extent. It was as I say, it was a slightly intimidating to be playing, you know, sort of someone who you'd watched avidly on TV growing up.
Do you get excited when they reference your Doctor on the current series? I know.
Yes, love it. Well, you see, I mean, and I know they would do that because Stephen Moffat is a huge fan of the classic series of Doctor Who, so he's not going to dispatch us into oblivion completely. So it's that's great. There always will be references, and always try and connect the programs. And of course, you know, with Time Crash, we connected the classic series and the new series.
So Adric was always, his death was always pretty controversial in the Doctor Who universe. What was your view of that direction?
Well, I knew that Matthew was going to leave. John had told me that, and then he said, "I've got this idea that I might kill him off." I mean, I must admit, I should have maybe considered the trauma it might bring to young children. But I thought it was a fairly good idea. I mean, I did say to Matthew, you know, if you're going to leave the series, it's much better to go out in a spectacular, heroic way than just
blaze of glory
and go, oh, I've decided to stay. I'm going back into E-Space now. So I thought it was a great way to go, really, and I thought it showed that the character, you know, you weren't safe. People weren't safe in the TARDIS. Even if something bad things happen, if you just fly around the universe constantly with nothing ever happening to anybody, you know, you lose a bit of an element of risk. So I think it brought that back to it. It did traumatise certain people, not least Russell T Davis, young boy growing up in Wales, who never quite forgave me.
Favorite role other than Doctor Who?
My favourite role, I have lots of favourite roles apart from that. I mean, I have a great fondness for Tristan, obviously, because it was the first, if you call it a breakthrough role, I suppose. I loved playing Campion, and also The Last Detective, which I think has gone out. You can certainly get the box sets over here, so I don't know if it's gone out over here. But I suppose my favourite, in a way, was a series that was very successful in Britain called At Home with the Braithwaites, where I played the husband of a woman who won £35 million on the lottery.
Oh, wow.
And at first had hidden it from me, and then I discovered it, and then gone slightly mad. But it was it was.
It's always fun to go mad.
Yeah, and it was about the effect that £35 million would have on an already dysfunctional family. That was the brilliant thing about it. That it just showed how they just imploded or exploded, whichever you like. Because it's the whole thing about winning the lottery. It's been bad news for virtually everyone who's won it. I remember sitting down once. This is before I played that part. At dinner, just happened to be talking to the woman who worked for Camelot, who used to run the lottery, and she said there hadn't been a winner who hadn't had to have psychiatric help after winning, because it just changes your view of everything. Yes, you've got an enormous amount of money, but you don't know who your friends are, you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to give money to, where to stop giving money to people. She said that was the problem. That was one of the huge problems. You know, it's all very well, you win all this money and you say, okay, I'm going to give £100,000 to everyone who's close to me. But what about the person next in line after that, who then suddenly hates you, or then comes to you and says, look, I've got this mortgage, I'm in debt, please, you've got all this money, give me some. And she said it just has a terrible effect on people. And it's so worse if they keep it secret. Because what do you do if you keep it secret?
I guess for many don't feel they're entitled to it either.
Well, yes. I mean, there's all sorts of things that, it's a great idea. And of course, if I won £35 million for it, I'm not going to say, sorry, I don't want it, it'll ruin my life. But I think there's no doubt that it probably would.
Yeah.
Oh, we just came from your panel over at the Marriott,
Mm-hmm.
and that room was almost completely full, and that room is an extremely huge room. When you walk in there, I mean, what kind of emotions do you feel when you see so many people that are there to literally see you and to see Sylvester?
It's hugely gratifying. Listen, one of the main difficulties in a weekend like this is kind of keeping your feet on the ground. You have how many people coming up to you, as I'm sure Sylvester does, and saying, you are my doctor, you are awesome, you are fantastic, you are wonderful. You know it's because you played the doctor. You don't know. You know it's not that you're awesome and wonderful, but still.
But you are awesome and
but
wonderful.
but it's still very nice to hear. You can't. Who's not going to want to tell someone to come up to them and go, "God, you're so amazing. You're wonderful. You meant so much to me. Your performance really helped me through." So it's fantastic to hear, and I'm not going to knock it, but at the same time. You can't, you can't, if you start believing it, that's very...
And I have to ask, the whole bit with the guitar and the spoons.
Yeah.
Was that planned?
That was planned beforehand, right?
No, all that happened was that Sylvester said to me, have you got a guitar? I said, absolutely not. And he said, okay, can we get, just in case someone asks the question. And so I said to him before, we're not doing this, are we? And he said, no, it's only if someone says, asked him if he played the spoons, and then they would come on with guitar. It sounded to me a bit like somebody knew there was a guitar. When they said, oh, something about the spoons, do you play, have you got an instrument? I felt like, oh, this is a bit of a setup. Because I said to Sylvester, we had not practiced anything. I said, this is going to be rubbish, so we can't say, okay, we're now going to give you a performance with spoons and guitar, because we haven't not rehearsed it. So it was kind of halfway between being planned and being unplanned. The possibility was there, but I thought we might get through it without someone saying, "Can you play the spoons?"
Except I think they might have had somebody in the question line.
That's what I'm saying. I think we were set up. That's why when the question came out, I looked at Sylvester like, "What?"
So several years ago, you did that sketch with David where you reprised your role. And what was that?
Time crash.
Yeah. What was that like going back to the role?
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, it wasn't like coming home because it was not my set. It was very much David's set. Mm-hmm. It wasn't where we used to film it. We were at Television Centre. They were now down in Cardiff. We were on a set that was wheeled in and wheeled out and very brightly lit, and they were on this fantastic, what they call a standing set. Mm-hmm. But certainly it was great to be there, and it was great, as I said, to link the two, and it was a brilliant script. That's the main thing. Stephen Moffat had written this great little script that worked on two levels. One of David, remember watching me, but also on the 10th Doctor, remembering being the 5th Doctor. So it was, I loved it. By the time we finished it, I was really into it. But then sadly I had to go back to London.
Was it like putting on an old glove, putting on the costume?
It was, yes, maybe your glove that didn't quite fit. An OJ glove. But it was fun. It was great to do it.
So you've done a lot of conventions here, over there, probably other places in the world. What do you see as being some of the differences between American fans, British fans elsewhere in Australia or whatever? In our
flesh on the
approach
show
to the
in America, actually, I would say.
But just in terms of
People are
our
at home in their bodies.
okay.
What are the differences? Not huge. I think probably you're more effusive over here. I mean, I think the British fans will probably mean the same thing, but not say it in quite a, they won't. I don't think any British fan has ever come up and said you're awesome. Sadly, why not? So they are still huge fans, but we're a little more repressed in Britain, aren't we? So in many ways, it's nice to come here because it's just. I mean, I love the fact that in America, what has always struck me is that the whole community, whether it's sci-fi, it's probably common to sci-fi, but certainly in the Who community, it's so inclusive of every possible, conceivable form of life that exists, and with no kind of, oh God, they're a bit weird, they're a bit odd. It's just everyone is. I did one convention, I remember, sitting in the front row doing a panel, and there was a dominatrix sitting in the front row with somebody on a lead, and nobody turned a hair. Nobody turned a hair. It was just like this most common thing in the world. Welcome. So I love that about and I think that's very often the attraction. I thought, of course, all of you will be excluded from this. That one of the Doctor Who often attracts people who have interaction problems. But what they find in Doctor Who and fandom is a marvellous inclusiveness, which they don't probably get in the outside world. So, some people are so nervous they can't speak, and it's great to see that there's such a community.
With having that kind of impact on fans, which is obvious here, what's the most touching fan moment that you've experienced?
Most touching fan moment?
Yeah, like a moment where it's just really, touched you.
Well, there's a woman
life.
came up to me today, and I mean, I didn't quite know what to do really, but she started to tell me how important Doctor Who was to her grandmother, and she started to cry. And I can't say what it was that was so touching, but it is immense. And you have a responsibility which you feel, which far exceeds your kind of, I don't feel like I'm going to be so important to these people. You're just an actor doing a job. But in the process of this woman had been so affected by watching the programme and seeing it for the first time, and remember sitting there with, I think, her grandfather, and she got really, it obviously meant an enormous amount to her. I felt a little inadequate, actually, to be honest with you, but it was immensely touching. When people do that, you are, because there's something about the character which does mean an awful lot to people. And when it's people who've had a tough time, that's when it's really, really touching, whether they've lost someone or whether they, feel lonely or isolated or whatever, and they found a kind of glimmer of hope and help through watching Doctor Who. I don't take credit for it, do you know what I mean? I'm just saying that it is immensely touching. I don't feel I deserve it. I didn't feel like I deserved to be standing there telling me how important it was and to be crying, but it's still immensely touching. So.
You were mentioning earlier that you wished that your scripts were a little bit better, and the special effects maybe didn't involve pantomime sea monsters.
Well, that was the special effects, to be fair, was the best we could do at the time.
Absolutely.
The way special effects have moved on by the time the series came back, you could do. We had no computers. We couldn't. We had to print everything out on letraset and then just film it.
Did you feel more free though, like with the Big Finish audio productions? Because we can imagine something.
Yeah. Well, as Colin Baker always says, the best scenery is on radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's perfectly true. You can do enormous things. I enjoy doing the Big Finish shows a lot.
Okay.
Because you can just do virtually anything. They usually do it afterwards, so it's fun to listen back. They always say to you, "We're going to put that special effect on afterwards." Just imagine that.
If you're able to work in another sci-fi program, what program would that be? Which one would you choose?
Of the ones that are on now?
Yeah, of the ones that are on now.
Ah, right. That's a very good question. What would it be? I was a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica when it came back. I don't know if it's that one that's on now that I really love. I think some of them have enormous potential. I started watching Under the Dome, and then I lost after about 3 episodes. It seemed to go off a bit.
Yeah.
I like Falling Skies. What worries me a bit about these things is I always see the producers sitting in the back room going, "How can I drag this out for 7 years?" Which is slightly worrying because nothing's going to happen. And that was what I loved about Battlestar Galactica, is they said, "We are going to end this we're going to finish this, and we're going to give you an ending, no matter what. So it wasn't going to be cancelled, and it was actually not going to be having to sit there for 7 years until they find, Earth.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good.
Do you ever use the doctor card to get in or out of things?
Oh, you mean the psychic note paper? Do you mean?
No, I meant like, I'm the doctor, let me in. Or I would not let
Get a
you
dinner
come in.
reservation or
Oh, I
something.
see what you mean. You can certainly do that to a certain extent. It has its advantages and disadvantages, really. But certainly when, sometimes you can just... I find it's always best if you say to people, I know you can't do this, but so I won't, there's no point in asking her, but if anything happens, can you get us a table here? And then they'll 5 minutes later, they'll come back and go, oh, I found you a table. But if you come in and say, I'm the doctor, please find me a table, they'll just basically say, sod off. So I find it, but I shouldn't be saying this on video. You set them a challenge and they usually come up with the goods.
Thank you very much.
This is wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed watching that press conference with Peter Davidson, and did you enjoy, hearing all he had to say about Doctor Who? Thanks again for watching. As always, make sure if you want to see more content like this to subscribe to our channel and like our Facebook page, The Girls Who Waited. We would greatly appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have more fantastic content like this for you in the future at more conventions.
And if you really liked this and you go to Dragon Con, you should maybe also say that you enjoyed this on their Facebook page or the BritTrack Facebook page.
So, make sure that you let Dragon Con know that you liked having us here too.
Yes.
And thanks as always again to Dragon Con, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.